Welcome to the grounds of the former State Public School for Dependent and Neglected Children. This state orphanage existed here in Otana from 1886 to 1945. This is the main building which served as the nerve center of the school for its 60-year history. Today it is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The state school served as a temporary home for thousands of orphaned, dependent, and neglected children. The goal of the school was to prepare the children for adoption. However, adoption rates were low, so many of the children were put out on indenture contracts or remained at the school for much of their childhood. I'm Harvey Ronglin, and I was awarded the state at this school for 11 years, 1932 to 1943. I came at age 4 and remained until age 15. The film you're about to see is a historic treasure. It is the only known film in existence of the children who lived this history. It was found in the attic of a Waseca home in 1995, 60 years after it was filmed. Here is a glimpse of our life at the school in the 1930s. This film was taken in the 1930s, no doubt on a Sunday afternoon, because this wasn't our typical dress, you might say. It was no doubt a planned situation where they were going to take our pictures of the boys and the girls coming out of their cottages and at different activities. When you see a woman in a white uniform, that'll be a matron, and she is the head of each cottage. And the matrons made your life. Your life was only as good as what your matron was. There was 16 cottages with about 30 kids to a cottage. Boys separated by age, while girls were in a cottage from nursery age to 18 if they were there that long. The lifespan of the institution was we had a nursery and you were there till you were 18 if you spent your whole time there. They sent kids in and out all the time. Children came from all over the state. Some children were adopted or sent home after a short time. Others spent their childhood there. When a child entered the school, he became a ward of the state. All parental rights were waived. Siblings would enter the school together, and they might be separated if their age was more than just a couple of years. And naturally, they were separated if you were a brother and a sister. Later, many were separated by adoption, never to be reunited with their siblings. When children arrived at the school, they were placed in a detention cottage for 3 weeks to keep them separated from the rest of the school population in case they had some type of a disease. They were also given their shots here and psychological tests. The girls, the first thing that happened to them was they had their head washed in kerosene because of lice. There was many very bad situations that way. Discipline was harsh. You never questioned the authorities. You did exactly as you were told, or you suffered the consequences. But there were good times as well. Each cottage had their own playground. You always had playmates. We had very good holidays. The 4th of July was a great day where was the only day that you played together, all together. Otherwise, you had to play on your own playground. You played with the girls and the boys we had races, we had peanut scramble, tug of war, and at 4 o'clock in the afternoon we got a Cheerio, which was a great day. Christmases were great. We each got 3 presents from the state of Minnesota. It was really, this is our coach right here. Mr. Wallen must have liked this golf. That's right outside of our gym. And we're back to the boys again coming out of their cottage. It was a fabulous institution. We had our own nursery, hospital, power plant, laundry, cemetery where 198 children are buried, farm, our own school. We went to school through the 8th grade, and if we were still there, we were bused up to Otana High School. Every building at this institution was connected by a tunnel underground because we generated our own electricity. We had our own power plant. and the electric lines went through this tunnel, and also the steam heat that was supplied from the power plant. Now there's a matron right there. Tumbling was big at the school. It was, our gym classes were mainly tumbling in the winter, and we had some kids that were awfully good at tumbling. They would entertain the Owatonna High School basketball fans during the halftime of their basketball games uptown. We also had other sports like football, baseball, boxing, swimming, and the girls had softball, gymnastics, swimming, and square dancing. You can see here a girl is tumbling, and this is no doubt a special deal. It's outside the gym for just today. We always tumbled inside. Every child had a job. It was in the cottage, or you worked in the fields or in the barns. We scrubbed and polished floors, mowed lawns, cleaned the streets. In the wintertime, helping garbage haulers, working in garden, dairy barns, bakery, hospital, and laundry. The girls, assisting with housework, scrubbing and polishing floors, worked in the kitchen, the dining rooms, the nursery, hospital, and the laundry. They cared for younger girls. There was maid service in the superintendent's house, helping with summer vegetables and canning. As you see these girls here, we always walked 2 by 2, going to eat, going to school, back and forth. We always went as a cottage, and you walked from the youngest to the shortest really, to the tallest, and it was 2 by 2. And we had sidewalks up there all over the grounds where we walked on those sidewalks. We had our own dining room up there, and the employees ate in a dining room of their own behind our dining room. We waited on them, but they were supposedly ate. There's Miss White, by the way, and she was the head of the little boys' cottage. Now here's the nursery, which was quite a bustling place. And the nursery, there would be, besides the kids that were sent there would on occasion be children that were just born, left on the school grounds with the intention that they knew they'd be found and they'd be put in that nursery and be taken care of. And one kind of comical incident is that as they'd be brought to the nursery, the nurses down there would name them. And in one age group was Napoleon Bonaparte, Florence Nightingale, and Ulysses S. Grant. Now that's kind of comical, or it's probably kind of tragic, whatever way you want to look at it. But when this group of kids went to high school, one of the teachers went to the superintendent and said, "I can't call that kid Ulysses S. Grant." And the superintendent said, "Well, that's his name." Anyway, here come the girls again. As you can see, they're well behaved. No doubt they were told what was going on and what to do here, and this was a planned performance. There's no question about it. Generally on a Sunday afternoon, the playgrounds would be full of children playing ball and jumping rope and whatever. We did it. We hopscotch on the sidewalk, and this was you can see the girls are kind of befuddled really, and same with the boys, and in a picture later on you'll see that the teachers really didn't know how to handle themselves either when the camera snapped on them. These were no doubt the big girls of the cottage, which I say the institution went till you were 18, and then the last two there are assistants in the cottage. The matron had 2 assistants under her in the cottage that worked for the cottage. Now here we span the grounds. There were 2 boys' cottages, and we'll span around to what were the 2 of the girls' cottages coming up. There was a girls' cottage, and that was another girls' cottage, which are torn down now. And that's our main building, which stands yet today, of course. And you span around to our tower, our smokestack. Now there's our hospital. Here's our nursery, which were twin buildings next to each other. There's our first school, and later made a big boys' cottage, and that was the superintendent's house there, and them were employees. Now here are the teachers. When I told you, they were also a little befuddled and didn't know how to handle the camera. so they get a little silly, really. And that was our coach on the one side. Here's a rock garden that was right below that C1 up there, was the first cottage built on the grounds. And the rock garden has been graded up now. It isn't there anymore, but I was always told that those rocks were meteors that fell from the sky and they're landed there. And I believed them. I believed everything I was told up there. And it was really a very beautiful sight in the summer with the flowers. And here's a kid on a chinning bar. This was right on his own playground, but naturally he wouldn't have that clothes on unless this was a very special day. But he's showing off a little bit there. I suppose they told him to show what he could do. And he's pretty good on those things. A lot of the kids could do miraculous things on those chinning bars and on the rings. This here, if you ever try that, that's quite a feat what he's doing, and it takes a lot of stamina to do what he's doing. Behind him there, oh, well, here's a fellow that you can see mischief written all over his face. He's probably thinking that I look great here, but I might be thinking about running away tonight, and he'll probably be missing in the morning, which many of them were. But by sundown, they probably were back in their beds. This is quite a feat here, and this is right on a playground. Our playground, the particular playground I was on, didn't have this type of apparatus, but this was C2, and they did. Now coming up will be the two boys that are doing this, and I recognize one is Howard Hempstead there on the left, and I can't remember the other kid's name, but this memorial of the state school kids, dedicated in 1993, is to ensure that with the passing of time, neither the children or the history of the state school will ever be forgotten.
For almost 50 years, thousands of Minnesota children called this stark building their home. It was the state school in Owatonna, an orphanage dedicated to saving neglected and abandoned children. In tonight's Extra, a family reunion of sorts. Tomorrow, some of the people who lived as children at the state school will gather together to remember. The institution was conceived as a place to care for dependent and neglected children. But during the Depression, many children ended up there because of economics. Their parents just couldn't afford them. Although the school provided food, clothing, and medical care, there was little love or individual attention. As Carol Evans-Gail Plawacki reports, many of the former orphans, now adults, have bittersweet memories of their experience.
At that time, all it took was for your family not to have enough money to support you.
The state stepped in and one day lined us all up in front of a courthouse, and the people around the area would come and pick out whoever they wanted. And they picked everybody but my brother and I, who were the two youngest boys.
The orphanage had become fairly crowded then. During the Depression, there were many homes that couldn't support all of their children, and not very many adoptive homes that were able to take another mouth to feed.
The time was the 30s. The place, the state school in Owatonna, Minnesota. An orphanage since the late 1800s, it was an institution that claimed dedication to saving children. Before and after pictures were used to graphically prove success. But some children were torn from living parents who allegedly could no longer support them. And even for those whose mothers and fathers had died, life was hard for the more than 20,000 children who ultimately passed through here.
The other people I've talked to about it invariably say the same thing, that they were grateful for a roof over their head and 3 meals a day, even though the food wasn't very good. And we did have an excellent school right on the grounds and sports. But, of course, the missing ingredient was any affection.
Donna was lucky. Removed from the home of her poverty-stricken mother, she was adopted after only a couple of years. But her sister lived at the orphanage until she was 18. And a baby brother who was adopted while still an infant has never been seen again by his siblings. And although Donna says her adoptive parents were good people, they expected she could simply leave behind the life and family she had known.
I think it was common to suggest to children that they just forget about it. And that was really considered a kindness.
Many of the children who were adopted were wanted as labor for Minnesota's many farms. But those left behind worked in the fields at the orphanage. The girls learned to sew.
All my memories are here. I can't...
Harvey, then aged 4, joined the ranks of the state school kids in 1932. Too young to be indentured, he remained there, a ward of the state for the next 11 years. Most of his memories are good. Others are painful recollections of brutal matrons.
So I got about here, and I took my tie off. She noticed it and brought me in there. And she beat my head against that cement wall in there till I was just howling and yelling.
But he tells the tale of cruelty almost nonchalantly. It was all he'd ever known. It wasn't until much later he knew the experiences had hurt him.
And as I grew older, I realized too that it wasn't the best environment to bring up a child. Fact is, I'd go to the grave before I'd allow my children to be brought up in such a large institution.
Too many went to their graves before they ever left the institution.
There are 198 children here from 1888 to 1942. The average age is just a little over 4 years old.
The early deaths were from an epidemic of diphtheria, which swept through the orphanage. Later, children died in accidents, one little girl from appendicitis. But for decades, many graves were marked only with a number, until a couple of years ago when crosses with names were erected.
To the children who rest here, may the love you lacked in life now be your reward in heaven. You are remembered.
Harvey knew they died too young to feel the love they could never know here. He knew they had to be remembered.
Each were an individual. They each were very important. They each deserve to be remembered. And I guess that's what this is all about, that we shouldn't bury them and forget them. They're worth remembering.
As are those who live to know the bittersweet experience of being state school kids. Gail